Leroy Burrell, the former track coach at U of H, is part of a family that is track and field royalty. The New York Times once dubbed them the world's fastest family. But in this interview, he talks candidly about losing his son to suicide. It is an honest and raw discussion about grief, regret, and lessons learned. First and foremost, tell me about your son, not the sprinter, but the kid you raised.
Well, Cameron was an amazing, young man, kid. I mean, I just like to think about, some of the things that, he did when he was, when he was a baby. Just always active, real busy, a great, imitator, like would imitate all kinds of things. I remember one time my wife showed him a video of Gail Devers at the Olympics, and he started jumping over, little diaper packets, and even did the fall as well. So it was always active, always did what he was always really serious, as well, and and I remember. As he grew up, he kind of slowly grew even more serious about everything that he did, almost to the point where it started to kind of get a little bit on the perfectionist side of things. And I always would wonder when he would, kind of relax a little bit, when he would kind of ease up a little bit, but just grew up as a easygoing kid, but really kind of bordered on perfectionism, and and so sometimes I often wonder, was that one of the issues that he dealt with as he approached his mid-20s.
Charles Barkley recently joked during the NCAA tournament that how disappointed he was that his daughter turned out to be a terrible basketball player. You must have been awfully proud that your son followed in not only your footsteps, but his mother's footsteps.
Well, I would say I was always a little worried about it, to be honest with you.
Why?
Well, because I used to tell Cam that I'd be proud of you no matter what you did. And I say the same thing to Josh. I've always felt like when you have parents like my wife and I, like Michelle and I, gold medalists,
at the Olympics.
Everybody always makes that comparison, and I used to cringe every time when Cameron began to excel athletically, and as a track and field athlete on his own right, because he actually exceeded almost everything that I did throughout my career, and it used to be Cameron Burrell, Leroy Burrell's son, or Cameron Burrell's son of Leroy and Michelle Burrell, and I used to cringe. I was like, give him his own due. Because he earned it. He was a better high school athlete than I was. He was a better collegiate athlete than I was. And I think that when he got to a point where he was a professional, he expected the same things. And there was and I think he put a timeline on that. But you can't put a timeline on the things that on your particular journey.
So he can't expect to get to where you were professionally at the same time, the same age. At
the same rate. He exceeded most everything I did, developmentally, high school, college, but you can't always, you can't put a timeline on that. And, my timeline was my timeline, and his, was his. But I think in the process, that timeline was imposed on him, and I think that was a lot of pressure.
I was going to say, was there pressure, obviously not from you or Michelle, it doesn't sound like,
no,
to live up to the legacy, so to speak? Sounds like there was.
I think so. I think in his mind, there was. But it's more than just the pressure to live up to the legacy. When you're a professional Olympic sport athlete, those chances to reach that level, they're few and far between. I mean, it's that every 4-year thing, and you got to hit that window just right. the every 2-year world championship thing, you got to hit that window just right. And if you miss the mark a couple of times, the pressure is actually multiplied, because this is your living, and so every time you don't hit the mark, you take a cut in your standard of living and your lifestyle. And I think he was facing that more often than I think someone his age should or should have.
I interviewed you in June of 2021 about the family legacy. Your son died 2 months later.
Yeah.
At the time that we talked, did you know that anything was perhaps troubling Cameron?
Yeah, I knew he was struggling with a few things. I don't think anyone can understand the depth of struggle with someone who was kind of on a schedule, like an Olympic schedule, like Cam was, with COVID. I think that put a delay on a lot of things. It isolated a lot of people, and Olympic athletes couldn't train. There were no or few competitions, and there was no opportunity to earn. For earning as a track athlete during that time, other than a contract. Cameron did have a contract, but your contracts were based on your performance, and if you couldn't perform, then your contract was in jeopardy. And I think that was a great deal of stress for him. But I just kept telling him at that time, look, just hang in there. We're going to be good. We're going to get this done. We were just coming back, I think, to a full-time training environment, and I was looking forward to Cam putting together a pretty good season. And I think shortly after we spoke, Cam went down to Miami to compete, and he got a little injury, and it kind of snowballed after that.
Was he in a bad place mentally because of the injury?
Well, I think that was part. He was kind of on the slippery slope anyway, and I think the injuries, he had a couple injuries that kind of mounted, and I think he got into a bad place there. He was looking at a situation in his personal life with a relationship. I think that was a struggle, and it just seemed like things were coming for that 2 months. Things were coming at him from all angles, and I'm trying to kind of coach him through that, from the coach perspective and from the dad perspective, and then my wife. Michelle was trying to help him, on the personal side of things. And I remember one day she came home towards the end of June, and she said, I'm really concerned about Cam. I think we need to get him. To see someone, because he keeps telling me that he's tired, and and he's struggling, and he's kind of had it with the sport, and maybe I should have listened a little bit more.
You think so?
Well, I mean, I listened, but maybe I could have done more. You're always going to think maybe you could have done more. Maybe you could have said something. Maybe you could have been there. The last day I saw my son alive, he had a little personal matter that was causing him a great deal of stress. And I think it was going to come to some type of resolution the next day. And I told him, hey, I'm going to be there with you. I'm going to go with you he had to go to a hearing or something, and I thought we were going to be okay. I probably should have drove him home, and maybe we should have hung out that evening. Maybe I could have got him through it.
But would you have expected this?
No, I didn't. I knew he was not looking forward. He was not looking forward. He was actually going to have a custody hearing,
I understand.
And he was not looking forward to it because he felt like some of his personal issues and personal problems, would come to the forefront. And I think he wasn't very happy about that. But I told him, hey, you know what? I don't judge you, and I'm here to try to help you. I'm here for you. And the last thing I told him was, we'll come in, we'll do this. It was a Zoom thing too. We'll come in, we'll do this Zoom thing. I'll be there with you. we'll be okay. And I guess he wasn't.
Do you remember getting the word about your son?
No, absolutely. Never forget it. Joshua called me.
Your second oldest?
Yes. My middle son called me, and Michelle and I were about to go to bed. Actually, we were in the bedroom, kind of just watching TV and about to go to bed, and Josh called and said Cameron's roommate called, and Cameron had been shot. And I was like, and my wife answered the call. I'm like, oh my God. We were like, oh my God. And while we were kind of running around trying to get out of the house, we called Caleb, and Caleb tried to explain to us what happened. And my wife said, I knew something was wrong. And we got in the car, and we were just thinking, please let him be okay. Please let him be okay. And when we got there, it was in the garage. He was on the roof of the garage. And it was really, oddly enough, man, it was really a beautiful night. It was clear. One of those rare nights where it's, clear here and it's not humid or anything like that. And we went all the way up, spiraled up to the top of the garage, and we got there, and the police were had surrounded his car, and they told us he was gone, and it was like, and that's all I could think is I just saw him a few hours ago, And I was just kind of walking around, kind of losing it emotionally, and he was laying on the ground. I couldn't see him initially, and I don't think they wanted us to see him. But I was walking around, and I was kind of just trying to gather myself, and I saw his, his feet, from kind of behind one of the police cars, and it was just, I just couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it.
When bad things happen, I know as a parent, my first thought is, how do I protect my kids?
Yeah.
So, how did you manage that with your other kids?
Well, we were all there. Josh had already been there, and so the first thing I thought was, I've got to. He sees this, and then Jaden was there as well, because we couldn't leave Jaden in the house by himself, and with this, you wouldn't want him by. He was only 11 years old at the time. It was just so many things going through my mind. It was, what did I do wrong? What kept coming to my mind is, where did I go wrong? Where did I go wrong? Where did I go wrong? And I think my wife did the same thing. She was thinking the same thing. The Harris County medical examiners, I said, hey, look, we're going to have to do some things here. It's not pleasant. You don't want to watch this. So why don't you go inside? So we went inside, and we were in his apartment, and we looked around, and we were just trying to figure out where was he? Where was his head? And we just kind of sat there. And then when they told us that they picked him up and we were going to take him down to the medical examiner's office, and we went back out, and it was like, it was almost like, well, we cleaned up, okay, we're good to go, and then they gave us some information, survivors information, and we went home, and we just sat there, and we were like, I can't believe it. And I just kept thinking, this is a dream, I'm gonna wake up, this is a bad dream, just a real bad dream, and I went maybe dozed off for a minute when we got home and woke up, and I'm like, this is a bad dream, it's a bad dream. And I looked at my wife, and we were like, no, it's not. And then just this, we just waves and waves of emotion, and then after that, waves and waves of people, came to our house, and calls, and
the look on your face right now, I think says a lot about what you were feeling. What has this painful journey taught you the last 2 years?
Well, it's funny, Len. I remember a couple years ago that kind of dealing with our student athletes down at the University of Houston, and I remember thinking a lot, because the whole issue of mental health, student athletes, mental health and welfare would come up, and I was like, if you're a student, if you're a big time athlete, you don't have time for that.
Really?
Yeah. Not. Maybe I didn't put that the right way. I just always felt like if you're going to compete at the highest level, you just got to be strong. You got to have it together mentally, and we just don't have time to let that the weakness, because first of all, sports is a struggle. It's all a struggle. Although it may look easy, we turn on a TV and we see the guys making a shot, catching the ball, making the block, whatever the case may be, whatever the sport is, it just looks like they do that all the time. But the general public doesn't know what effort and commitment that goes in that, and we talk about it a lot, but even the talk, and even the, playing that part of being an athlete, or anything great for that matter, it doesn't really, it pales in comparison to the actual struggle that a person goes. And I know because I've been there. I've had disappointment. I've been injured. I've been, gone to a big meet and lost, and I've gone to a big meet and won. And I used to always think, athletes, you don't have time for that. You gotta keep it together. That's what we do. That's part of the job.
Have you changed your opinion about that?
Absolutely. Because these kids are delicate and fragile, and have all of the struggles that a normal person would have. And I think it's a generational thing as well. My generation, maybe there was some inherent struggle that we had coming up, but I think the succeeding generations didn't have some of those struggles. I think
maybe it's different.
Yeah, it's different. And if you're a child of the 70s, kind of like me, I just remember everybody was hungry, and I remember that we all had to figure out a way to make it work, and go shovel snow or rake leaves or whatever to get to make a little money, and not be in your parents' pockets, and kids
tough through it.
Exactly.
That was the attitude.
Exactly.
I know what you're talking
exactly.
about.
Exactly. Because you probably lived that life as well. Well, this generation, they didn't grow up that way. So it's not, the littlest thing can derail a kid who you think's on the right track. And I just didn't see it that way. As a coach and as a leader, I was thinking, come on, pick yourself up. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You got it. You can handle this. There are a lot of things that kids can't handle now, and I learned that firsthand.
How has that changed the way you coach now?
Well, I try to be a lot more sensitive to those issues. I ask people how they are now, a lot more. I'm more of a hugger, and I do a little bit more check-in, and I don't expect. I used to expect kids to kind of, like, if something doesn't go well or struggle or whatever, God, you can handle that yourself. I used to expect them to get through that on their own.
Deal with it.
Yeah. Now I expect to have to help people deal with it. I used to be a little bit more blunt. I'm not nearly as blunt as I used to be. And I'm always mindful that one or two little things can really tip the scales out of the favor of being in balance. And I'm always trying to be the moderator, balanced person for some of the young men and women I get to work with.
What would you like to say to all parents out there?
Well, I think just from the athletic side of things, and maybe not just athletic, I think we all seem to feel like our kid has to reach a certain standard, get that scholarship, be the A, get the A, be the valedictorian. There's a lot of pushing, and it's almost like if you don't reach that pinnacle, then there's almost like a feeling of failure. I think we need to teach kids, how to manage and judge their success individually. But unfortunately, it feels like the resources and like the spoils of victory are high right now. And it's almost like there's a scarcity of success, and if you're not there, then you failed. And we have to figure out a way as a society how to bridge that gap.
Because not reaching certain things doesn't mean you're a failure.
Exactly. But I think in a young person's mind,
it's all or nothing.
Exactly. And there's this notion that you just blow up. It happens. And most of us live a life where we kind of
build.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And a lot of kids don't see that.
Well,
because that's what happens when you pick up your phone. You see somebody who just made it. Mm-hmm. But you don't see the making it part. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to teach that a little bit more.
How are you doing today, you and your wife?
We're okay. Obviously, we've been back to town a couple of times, but we're okay. We have a great support network around us, and we're good with where we are and who we are. But we miss Cameron. We do. I know Josh misses him. And we worry about the other two a lot. We do. So I think the two of us, the two of us is one. I think we're from the generation where you do have to keep going. But we worry about Cameron. We worry about his friends. We worry about his daughter. We worry about the people in his life. We spend a lot of time worrying about a lot of other people. So we probably need to spend a little bit more time worrying about ourselves.
Leroy, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for being a great friend.